the Vice President and Chief Evangelist with AWS. He has guys. He having
Welcome, Jeff, into the event, and we are very much excited to see you here. We are still seeing a flux of people joining. India is almost devastated with the new COVID wave that has come up. So we may see not as much what we anticipated, but we'll see the flux of people still joining. Still, the motivation is high here. And welcome, Dheeraj. So Dheeraj is my partner there in US, and what I will do is I have with me my team Gavaskar, Jay, and a couple of other guys who are managing the whole show in the background. So what I will do is, like, because I'm mostly managing in the background, so I will pass the mic to Dheeraj to start with, and do further ado. Dheeraj, please.
Thank you so much, Anjani. Let me try and share my screen and let me know if you guys can see my screen or not. Let me know. Do you see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. Thanks, Anjani. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fifth Eye platform. I'm really excited. I mean, you can see my face. I'm really excited, especially Jeff, you being in here. Thanks so much, Jeff, for giving us the opportunity to speak about you first to start with. Um, as we all can see on the first page, Jeff is the Vice President and Chief Evangelist with AWS. He has guys. He having over 660,000 people followers in Twitter. Oh, I mean, it's something. It's something. Trust me. He has
I believe
over
you can see me now.
a couple of decades experience in IT industry, which is like 46 years of experience he has. He's been with AWS for close to 19 years in there. Almost like since the AWS started, I would say. He's the one who started the AWS blog site in 2004. I mean, he started his career when even not even I was born in 1976. So excited and so excited to discuss about his journey and about the technologies he's been into. He was a program manager in Microsoft in 1997. So that's something to start with about the Jeff. I mean, things to talk about him, but yeah, let me move forward with the next slide. All right, so some important information about the audience who are on stream. You can always, I mean, if you're looking at to chat with us, to paste your any of the question notes or anything, if you want to chat with us, you can go to fifthire.com/Jeff and you can provide your information and you can chat with us. For those people who are on stream, we can also have the certificate at the same place. You can claim for your certificate. Once we're done with the session, there will be a code which will be shared to the entire audience, and then they can claim their certificate on that. So let me quickly talk about what Fifth IR is. we are we are ready for the fifth revolution, fifth industrial revolution. We are across the world. I mean, this is the latest data what we have. We've been touched almost all of the habitable. You can see that on continents. So we have like everywhere across the board and over. So let me quickly talk about exactly what we do. So it's a platform where we do the agile sessions to develop you or to develop the people as T-shaped. Now T-shaped is a little interesting piece of it. So we try and capture the vertical and the horizontal of the technologies and the uh, especially with the industry. So I think additional. Okay. Now, so we are across the world. I mean, to start with, multi-cloud technologies is the parent where we have Fifth IR, which does all the education related sessions and everything. We have end-to-end product as well, which can help us build the whole solutions. Um, we are in India, of course. We are in US. We are in Singapore, and we're in UK. Oops, sorry. Let me close this. Okay. So we say that we have a four generations of transformer as guest because there are people who are the youngest CEO, like Dipanshu, who's very young and who's a CEO in startup, and we have, as we know, we have Bill Iman. Bill Iman is basically a father of data warehouse who invented the data warehouse. He's also part of us. Jeff, we know Jeff is another legend with us. Bob, who's another legend. So we have a variety of people, right from all different generations of people to talk about technologies, to update and to give their and to share their journey with their experience and their knowledge. AWS, we all know. Sorry, you want to say something, Jeff? Okay. AWS cloud globally, so we know that we have like 80 different availability zones across 25 different geographic region, with plans of coming up with 15 more or so in different regions like in Australia, India, Indonesia, Spain, and Switzerland. I mean, we all know, the entire world know how AWS and what they're doing in the industry. So here's Jeff. About Jeff, as I already mentioned, I mean, whatever I say is always less because the legend what he is. So you can
So
always
adding
reach
to
out. Please,
Yeah,
please
so
go ahead.
adding to Dhiraj, so it's 46 years, which is enormous. Like it started his career in 1976. I was still not born. Dhiraj was not born. Many of
Yeah,
us would not
that's
have
right.
been born there.
That's
And then I started as a programmer, then as a consultant, then as a principal manager, principal program manager, principal architect, director, vice president in multiple companies. And then he started as an evangelist in AWS. He worked as a director and then moved as vice president. He was a person who started AWS blog and which has been powering whatever the product team has been doing, the magic that has been doing in the background to the world to let us understand what they're doing, what they want to. So he has been the mouthpiece of the product team for long to tell people and let people understand what AWS is for us. What we know about AWS is somewhere Jeff has a strong contribution around it. Um, it's just like from the beginning when we joined into the industry, any HR manager would ask us, "What would you like to do after 5 years, 7 years, 10 years down the
yeah.
line?" So,
I,
so Jeff's story is something which you can just copy and paste
yes.
and say, "No, I can do
So we
something.
always
I can do like
we
that."
always say one-liner, right, Anjani?
Yeah.
What a journey one should always dreamed of. I
Yes.
would say that.
Yes.
So thank you, Jeff, again. So let
Yeah.
me, having said that, let me move to the next slide to talk about who we are. And Anjani mentioned about me. I'm the co-founder of multi-cloud in Fifth IR. Anjani is the founder. We have the entire team. So Gavarskar is our delivery director, we are 4 or 5 people are already behind the scene, and we are running the bot and in the background, and our team is working towards, all the everything, like right from streaming, setting up the whole thing. It's live across the world. So that's the main people are these people are the main people. I think Jay's picture is not there. Mithunjay is another person who's also in this. So let's move to the next slide to talk about the agenda. So today's agenda is to talk about latest features with AWS in the area of hybrid and multi-cloud. AWS for fintech and banks, AWS for startups and small businesses. We all know that, especially in Bay Areas, there are numerous companies who's been relying on AWS because of the options and so many less, expense they would have to face towards setting up their environment and all. We'll try and get those certain questions which has been collected from different audience. We'll open the question answer sessions, first come first serve. We'll try and handle quite a few questions. Depending on how time permits. I've already taken almost 10-12 minutes. So over to Jeff, and right after Jeff's session completes, as I said, I'll be sharing the code, and I'll let you know how to claim your certificate.
Yes,
Yeah, please go
and
ahead.
adding to Dhira, so there will be a question hour. So we have collected few great questions from technologies across our community. So Jeff would be trying to answer whatever he can, and then he can also guide us to someone who can help us out there. And then also we'll give opportunity for the audience to type in their question. They can type in through the way Dhira said, is through the chat box, and also which is there on the Fifth IR link, which is the Facebook chat box. Our team is monitoring it. Our bots are there in the background. You can connect to our Telegram channel, and also you can chat and type in the chat window here, and we'll pick up the question and ask with Jeff. Thank you. And back to Jeff. Yeah, please.
The floor is yours, Jeff. Can you unmute him, please?
All right, I am so excited to be speaking to all of you today. I'm coming to you from Seattle, Washington. It's a little bit of a rainy Saturday morning here, kind of spring. We're still really waiting for spring to show up. Dhiraj and Anjani, really appreciate all your very, very kind words. It's an honor to speak to you. I know this pandemic has been just really, really awful, and I've been reading just this week about just how things have gotten just really bad. And in India, my heart just really goes out to you and all of your families. And do your best just to be really careful and to stay safe. We can't ever look at some just tragedy like this and say, wow, there's some kind of a blessing or a benefit, but because there isn't. It's just a really horrible kind of a situation all around. I do say that we are learning a little bit about remote connection and remote presentation, and this ability for me to sit here at my desk and share with you. Don't know that I'd necessarily be able to travel halfway around the world to present these days, but being able to stream from my desktop is hopefully a reasonable substitute. So I'm going to give you just a few minutes of kind of an update on what I often call AWS what's new. And there's always something new with AWS, as you know. I do a presentation once a quarter to the industry analysts, the Gartners and Forresters and so forth. And I've taken some material from one of my most recent presentations there to share with you.
Jeff, one request. Look like the screen is not coming the full screen. So if you can do something to make
not
it full
the full
screen.
screen. Let me see what I can see here. Okay, it's being shown as shared. Let me see what I'm seeing there. Are you not seeing my slides at all?
Yes, we are able to see. We are able to read, so we can continue here. No issues.
Okay.
And the size, it shows up really small.
So it shows up really small. Okay. Look, how about that?
Yeah, this is
Perfect.
great. Yeah,
Perfect.
perfect.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
In a single week, sometimes I'll use 3 or 4 different presentation technologies, and every one of them works just a little bit differently. So let me go ahead and put that off to the side. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our global infrastructure. We always continue to just expand the footprint of AWS around the world, and in the last quarter, we added a pair of new CloudFront edge locations in Croatia and in Indonesia. We've been working really hard to get wavelength into more locations around the world. So wavelength is this really interesting combination of AWS and 5G. And what we do is we've been working with telecom providers, and we started with some telecom providers in the US, and we're starting to go beyond the US now, where we put very select AWS compute and storage services in effectively the communication hubs of the 5G telecom providers. This means that as our customers are building the newest generation of apps that are 5G powered, they have very, very, very low latency from these very specific geographic areas to the 5G communication center, and from there to the effectively the local AWS compute and storage resources. So we're starting in the US, we will go global over time, but what you should think about is this ability you have to build all kinds of applications that can make use of 5G with really high bandwidth and very, very low latency. So I'm very excited about what we're doing with wavelength zones. When you look at all the different CloudFront edge locations we have right now, we're now at over 225 in 90 cities and 47 countries around the world. This is in 2 different levels. So the apps that you build and that you give out to your customers, those apps are going to make requests to any of the 215 edge locations. If the material that they need is present, it's going to be served up directly from an edge location. If it's not found there, the next kind of place to check is one of the regional mid-tier caches. So we go from the edge to the mid-tier cache. If the information is cached there, it's then returned to the edge and from there to the end user. But only if it's not at either of those 2 locations do we go back to the origin. So the idea of this very rich, very complex set of points of presence is just to get the content, either static or dynamically generated content, out to your users just as quickly as possible. We continue to build more and more AWS availability zones around the world. There are currently 80 in operation. There are 15 more under construction. Another piece of what we're doing, and a lot of you can see that the goal here is to get compute power and storage and processing just as close to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. We've started to build, in addition to the wavelength zones, which take advantage of the 5G, we're building local zones where the local zones are basically a smaller footprint of AWS that we can build more and more quickly. We've announced we've got 2 operational local zones in Los Angeles. We have 3 others in the US that are in a preview. We've got, in addition to that, we've got 12 additional in construction in the US, and we will then, as always, we start small and we grow over time. One thing I want to always make clear is that we grow and we build services in response to customer demand. So when you see that we're launching services in particular parts of the world, we're launching availability zones, we're launching regions, we always need to hear from you. We need to hear about your use cases, your projections, and if you're working directly with an AWS salesperson or account manager, give them a heads up. Say, okay, this is where we are. This is where we'd like to be in a year, 2 years, 5 years. Give them your plans, give them your projections, so they can actually feed that back in, and that can feed into our plans here. So we've currently got 25 regions around the world. We are currently building 15 additional availability zones that are spread out across these five regions that you see here. Just last November, I announced that our second region in India is underway. It'll be the AWS Asia Pacific Hyderabad region, where we're looking to have that open in mid-22. This will have 3 availability zones. It'll be our second region in India and our 11th region in Asia. So let's talk a little bit about some of the newest AWS compute services. And I've taken some content from my analyst deck. I've taken a few update notes from reInvent as well. One thing that underlies a lot of our most recent innovation is what we call the AWS Nitro system. So with the Nitro system, we have been really making a big investment in building custom hardware. We've got the Nitro security chip that makes sure that when the physical hardware boots up, that it verifies the integrity of the hardware and the software. We've got the Nitro hypervisor, which provides very, very lightweight virtualization. We've got the Nitro cards that take care of things like encryption and fast access to storage. So we are building our own hardware now from the ground up, designing, building our own chips. You've probably seen some of the work that we've done with the Graviton 2 processor. This is an ARM-based architecture that we have developed ourselves, that we can iterate very, very quickly, and that we can also adapt very, very quickly as new customer use cases emerge. The Nitro system lets us do some very, very powerful things. So, for example, we launched earlier this year the Nitro Enclave. So the Nitro Enclave is this very, very protected environment within the already well-protected environment of EC2. So when you launch one of these Enclave environments, you actually get a set of digital signatures that describe the hardware, the operating environment, the application environment, and you can actually use that to confirm that you're running in the expected environment with the expected OS and with the expected software. So this is a very highly secure environment, and the environment itself is protected so that if you have to be in a situation where you're processing customer data and you have to have an incredible degree of isolation, and you might be in situations where there's a kind of an arm's length relationship, if you will, between you and the customer, where the customer says, well, I'll share with you my data, but you have to promise not to go deep inside that data. Just process it in this controlled environment. You can use the Nitro Enclave to do that. In the last 6 months or so, we've launched a number of different new types of EC2 instances. At reInvent, we launched the Mac instances, so customers can run Mac software. We've launched many new Graviton-powered instances from the C6GN, which have So to take one of these apart, the model numbers apart, if you will, the C says that it's compute optimized. The 6 is 6th generation. The G is for Graviton, and the N is for enhanced networking performance. So you can see the C6GN has all of those. G4AD is GPU powered. M5ZN gives you very high single-threaded performance. D3 and D3N for dense storage, and R5B for high bandwidth to storage. So those are some that we announced at reInvent, and then just earlier this month we announced the X2GD. So these are for customers that run very applications that need a lot of memory. So again, taking apart the model number or the name, X is for the high memory optimized, 2 for the 2nd generation, G for Graviton, and then D for local storage. So this is because it's Graviton powered. It's compatible with ARM applications, designed for your scale out workloads, things like in-memory databases, memory analytics, relational databases, customers doing electronic design automation, caching servers. You can see that they're available in a lot of sizes. You can start at a single VPU and 16 gigabytes of memory, and go all the way up to the 16x large or the metal with 64 vCPUs and 1024 gigabytes of memory, and local storage to go along with this. So when you see all these different instance types, the thing that you should think about is just the flexibility and the options that you have for picking the instance type that is the best possible fit for your particular workload. A couple quick storage notes. One of the most recent launches we did for EFS. So as a reminder, EFS is the elastic file system. So basically lets you create a network file system accessible via NFS in the cloud. We know that customers always want more and more cost effectiveness for their storage, and they're always looking to us to make it to effectively lower their costs, to make it easier to run more kinds of applications on AWS. So we introduced a pair of storage classes within EFS that we call infrequent access. So the pair of these are standard infrequent access and then one zone infrequent access. When you use either of these, and when you enable lifecycle management so that your infrequently accessed files can go from the standard to the infrequent access, you can end up saving up to 92% on your storage costs when you just simply enable lifecycle management for your EFS volumes. One of the reasons that we do this is because talking to customers and talking to industry analysts, we learn that within a typical file system, generally somewhere around 20% of the files on that file system are accessed frequently. The other 80%, they're valuable data, but you just don't actually need to access them very frequently. So instead of having to manage that manually and have multiple types of file systems, you can simply enable the lifecycle management, and you can have EFS take care of that for you. All right, a few notes on some developer tools. This is one of my favorite recent launches, is the fault injection simulator. And I try my best not to play favorites because we have so many great launches and so many teams building interesting things. But I'm really excited by this one because we have a lot of customers that are building AWS applications with very interesting, very complex architectures, a lot of different AWS services coming into play. And customers want to have a lot of confidence in the resilience, the scalability. They want to know, as we build these complicated architectures, how can we be very, very confident that if a component fails, if an API fails, if a service starts to run a little bit slowly, how do we get the confidence in that architecture over time? So the fault injection simulator lets our customers, first, you build your system, and then with the fault injection simulator, you can create experiments, and you can say, well, let's very, very carefully, under these controlled situations, let's take some of these instances offline, let's fail over a database, let's make these API calls run a little bit more slowly than usual. We launched this at reInvent. We announced general availability earlier this year, and it currently supports EC2, it supports the container service, it supports the Elastic Kubernetes service and RDS. And one thing that you've probably noticed if you've been part of AWS for any length of time, we start with something new, and we don't build every possible feature to start with. We always start with something that is a big step forward, but leaves a lot of room for us to progress past that. And with the fault injection simulator, you can see that we support an important, but by no means complete list of services. And if you'd like, I've actually got that pulled up here on, let me see if I could do a really quick share here. And what I want to do, let me stop that sharing. I'm going to share another screen with you. Okay, well, I want to give you an actual quick demo of the of FIS. Hoping you can see my EC2 screen right now. Okay, so right now, what I have, let's see, in just one sec here. Okay, all right, I have 5 EC2 instances running.
Sorry, Jeff. Can you
Yeah.
expand that, please?
Sure, of
Increase
course.
the size again.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's do that. Better there?
Perfect.
Great. Okay. I have a really big screen here on my desktop, so I'm never quite sure what ends up being too big. Okay, so I have 5 EC2 instances running here. And just for demo purposes, let's imagine that this dev instance, that's my developer instance. I don't want to touch that. But I've got 4 test instances. And what I've done is I've tagged each of those. Let me set up my tags here. I have tagged my test instances. I have a tag called mode, and the tag on my test instances is just really simply test. So these are just 4 T2 Nano instances, really nothing special. But I want to use those as part of my test. I want to make sure that if I were to take these instances offline and imagine that these are part of a bigger system, a bigger environment. With FIS, I can construct an experiment, and I do that by building an experiment template. So here's my list of experiment templates. I've got just one right now. And I call this one stop test instances, not actually a very creative name. So what this does, well, let's take this apart. The first piece, it has a set of targets. And so the list of targets are all EC2 instances. And I say I want to select all of the targets that have a tag with the name of mode and a value of test. So this is basically saying, what do we want to affect as part of my test? Now I have an action, and the action is going to operate on those targets. So the action basically just says, I want to stop all the instances that have the tag of test. Now, the purpose of running one of these simulated faults is to say, if we were to do this particular action, we want to verify that the system continues to work as we expect. So what you want to do is you also create a CloudWatch alarm that would indicate is something not running properly. And that says when we introduced this fault, the system actually didn't work as expected. So what I have is I have a simple CloudWatch alarm called system busy, with the idea being if I take these instances, if I stop these instances and my system gets too busy, that is not what I want to happen. I really want my system to keep on going as expected. So if while we're conducting this experiment, the system gets busy, that's an error condition, and I don't have enough scalability, I don't have enough resilience to continue. So I got my actions, I've got my targets. And one really interesting thing is we can actually go in and we could do an update here. There are many different kinds of actions that we could choose to do on our resources. So we can reboot instances, we can stop them, we can terminate them. We have several different actions on containers. We can drain container instances to take a certain number of instances within a cluster offline. We can terminate instances within an EKS cluster. And we can also introduce effectively simulated low-level errors. We can cause various API functions to return errors. We can cause API functions to throttle, to basically say that they're too busy. We can have API functions flag that they're unavailable. If we're doing a database, we can do a failover of a database cluster or a database instance. And we can also use SSM to run various SSM documents. So the kind of the big picture, if you will, is just thinking, once you build a system and you're very happy with your basic architecture, you can then use FIS to say, let's actually try all these different faults that might happen. Let's make sure that when any of these different problems might arise, that our system actually can survive each of these different ones. So generally what's going to happen, you're going to start out with a fairly simple list of experiments, but each time you gain some confidence in the operation of your system, you're going to want to start building more and more different kinds of experiments. So once we've got this experiment, what we can do, let's go back to our templates. And all I need to do is just say action, and I say start experiment. You click start, and I just type in start. Because my experiment is going to actually make changes to my running resources, I always need to actually confirm it here with the start experiment. And when I say start, it's going to start running, and I can go over here. I'm going to refresh my instances a time or two, and we can see they're all running. The experiment's going to take a few seconds to get started, and I'm conducting the experiment, and my instances are all stopping. So if this was a real well-architected system with lots of moving parts. I'd be able to watch all the different CloudWatch metrics, and I would be able to say, okay, I took these instances offline. My system still works as expected. I've got additional confidence that I did my job right, and I've architected a resilient system. So you might envision even connecting this up as part of like a CI/CD pipeline, where every time you make a change to your implementation, before you even deploy new code to production, you could run a set of experiments to make sure that you've built in the desired level of resiliency into your system. And so after I see my experiments, I can look at my list here, and I can see my experiment is completed and it ran successfully. We can look at my experiment ID, and we're all done there. So that was just a quick demo of
That's fantastic.
FIS. Isn't that cool?
It's fantastic. Yeah, this is very
All
cool.
right. Let me get back to my PowerPoint here. Just have a few more slides here. Okay, let's see. Stop sharing that.
So as one of the best thing about it is, like, everyone talks about chaos engineering a lot. We see a lot of messages on LinkedIn. We have been talking for it for like almost 3-4 years, 5 years. It's getting more hotter and hotter with the time. But the way we implement it and experience it is here, given in this sort with the tags, and then the way you can easily play with it is one of the fantastic things that this tool has done now.
Exactly. All right, let me tell you just about a couple of our machine learning latest developments, and then we'll switch over to our questions. So we continue to invest heavily in machine learning. We announced at reInvent that we're building our own machine learning training chip. We call it the Trainium. The idea is that this will be available later this year, and it's going to give you more teraflops of compute power than any other machine learning instance in the cloud. We'll support all the popular frameworks. We'll support TensorFlow and MXNet and PyTorch, and you'll be able to get to the power of this Trainium chip via an EC2 instance and also through SageMaker. In things that we've recently launched, we've got a lot of customers that are using AWS and IoT you can think of in production processes and factory floors. And so Amazon Lookout for Vision is a really interesting service that actually helps to watch any kind of a process or some kind of automation or like a factory production line, and help to identify what items are flowing across that production line. Do they look the way they should? Are all the parts in place? Has the paint been applied properly? Have all the components been affixed to a circuit board, for example? So really interesting use of machine learning. Here's a couple of examples of how Lookout for Vision can be put to use. You could envision this in a car factory, where you could look for dents, scratches, bad welds on a door panel as part of production. In a electronics factory, you could look at circuit boards. You could make sure that the proper components are in place, that they've been put in the right positions, make sure that there's nothing that's been mispositioned, mislabeled, inserted improperly. Or at the process level, we've got customers in the semiconductor business. In the semiconductor business, that they want to look at their wafers, and they want to say, well, is there a repeating pattern of defects that might be there across multiple different steps of different wafers? Maybe we've got a little bit of a fine tuning we need to do in a particular part of a production process. So very, very interesting use of machine learning. Now, very, very similar kind of a model, but for your own technical and business metrics, is a service called Amazon Lookout for Metrics. So the idea here is that you train this on your metrics when both your business and your technical metrics are in the normal state, and then Amazon Lookout for Metrics is going to be able to detect anomalies. Like, are numbers kind of going down towards zero? Like, one of the interesting things that we know about distributed systems is they often tend to fail incrementally. So when you're have a very complicated e-commerce system, of course, an Amazon e-commerce system, right? When you have an e-commerce system, it's very rare that the entire site just kind of falls down all at once. Instead, things start to get a little bit slow, and you start to say, well, the number of pages that we're serving, or the number of items being added to the shopping cart is going down, or the number of successful customer checkouts. It didn't suddenly hit zero, it's tending towards zero. So Amazon Lookout for Metrics is able to actually detect those kind of anomalies and alert you generally before you've gotten to the total failure point. When things are starting to look a little bit strange, you'll get that indication, so you can go in and possibly remedy that before it's a total 100% failure. That was just a brief set of just a few AWS announcements. I know we've got some great questions queued up, and would love to start talking about a few of the questions you got.
Thank you, Jeff. So let me again welcome you all on my machine. Let me know when you can see my screen. So here is the. So let's talk about. So these are the questions which we got it from different places, Jeff. So it's like to start with. How does AWS ensures data security for organizations?
Sure. Okay. So I remember back in the very early days of AWS, I'd often go and at the point when I really didn't have a whole lot to talk about. Like if you think back to the early days, I had S3, I had EC2, I had SQS. That was effectively the entire portfolio, and no one knew what the cloud was. This is 2008, 2009, 2010. No one knew what the cloud was. Everyone had their own data centers, and of course the question was, well, this sounds wonderful technically, but what about security? And I felt it was really important to really start at the beginning and say, well, we didn't build these services and then add security under and around them. We started from the beginning and say, well, we do expect customers to put really important business critical workloads on these. Let's build in security from the beginning. And so we start this with literally on the first day you join Amazon, you're informed of just how much we care about customer obsession and how carefully we have to be with customer data. We routinely, as employees, we have to go through refresher training every 6 months on the ins and outs of security. When you talk to Andy Jassy, who's now the CEO of AWS, will soon be the CEO of Amazon, Andy will always say, without security, we simply don't have a business. And that thinking really pervades everything we do. So there's a couple different things. It's how do you train your employees to understand how important security is? How do you have the right processes in place to make sure that customer data is safe from kind of data integrity and from making sure that only the systems and people that see it are able to see it? And then what can customers do to protect their data? And so we try to share all that different information just as broadly as possible. You'll find that many different parts of AWS actually have encryption built in. The encryption often uses the keys that are private and specific to a particular customer. So AWS to customer to customer, no one has access to those keys except for that individual customer. The customer can supply us with their own keys. We can do things like the key management service, where the keys are locked up in effectively a hardware device. The customers have a lot of different controls and options for data security. We have a number of white papers. We have solution architects. We have various kinds of controls and auditing tools that are going to give. There's not one simple answer to security. We have people that build their whole careers around security, but so basically, really important, definitely.
Yeah, basically based on the organizations, we decide and opt on it depending on what exactly they're expecting it towards the security side, right? Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so next question we have. By the way, these are all based on the people interest after they saw you coming on board, so they started sending. So there were hundreds and hundreds of questions we got, but we tried combining everything within these 4 or 5 different questions. So the next one we have is it a myth or reality that AWS or cloud platform are unsafe to host your innovation? Just in case, that's in case.
This one, this
Uh,
is yeah. This is like many of the architects when they do pre-sales, they
right,
questions, they get this type of questions, and they obviously they
right.
answer it out. But just wanted to hear from someone like you. So how you
Sure.
how
Okay.
because
So
it puts a weight, right? So
so part of this, the training that we get from Amazon, and we get this regularly. We get very regular, frequent reminders. Is just how important customer data is, and just how we when we say like sniffing around business logic, we don't have access to customer code and customer logic, and we don't have the ability to log into instances. We certainly can't look at customer source code or customer applications from a technical from a technical level. We have no way to do this, but from an employee level, that it's something that we are trained again and again and again. Like, even if that opportunity was there due to some technical flaw, you would never exploit it. You would file a security ticket right away and say, I found some way to see customer data. That would be considered like a severity one issue that we would ticket and remedy immediately. So we're we obsess over our customers. We protect our customer data from the customer itself, customer to customer, customer to AWS, within AWS. There's many different effectively protections and safeguards that would keep the customer data and logic safe.
The next one we have is, how does AWS serverless computing moving to open standard as like it did for S3, so that when locking should not be an issue?
This is a really interesting question, because I'm not quite sure what open standards there are at this point for serverless computing, but the majority of what a customer builds isn't going to be directly using AWS APIs. The most of what the customer is going to be doing, they're going to be using any one of a number of open languages to build their serverless functions. For example, they're using Python or Java or .NET to build their serverless applications and to put their business logic. So most of the customer's proprietary investment is in the business logic, and it's inside the functions. So when I look at what Lambda does, for example, Lambda is making it really easy to connect that business logic up to events and to data and to activate it. But inside all those Lambda functions is effectively code that is built on any number of open languages.
okay, so it was explicitly asked by a couple of engineers and architects who are mostly providing solution, and this is again a client question, and this is again a sales point for many people in the pre-sales, that they will go for vendor logging or blah 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 if you go on serverless. So but yeah, obviously people suggest the way you suggested, that obviously the logic is there in the function, not in the Lambda or Azure function or whatever you choose for. But maybe sometime open standard works like the S3, right? So the way it has been open now, so multiple companies have come out with the same standard, and the same API works for different product, right? So yeah.
Right, and I've seen several different like local development options for Lambda, where if you want to be like building Lambda functions on your laptop with no connection whatsoever, that there's effectively ways that you can do that. We're still so early in serverless. I mean, let's remember that serverless is, I don't think that word really even existed 7 years ago at this point. So we're still very early, and there's still so much innovation going on. Standards typically seem to come about after the kind of the big burst of innovation has already happened. So we're still in that kind of big bang level of innovation, and lots of innovation, lots of creativity, lots of new things happening. And while we're what's a good way to say this? We don't change things in a way that breaks customers' existing investments. We're certainly going to continue to invent a lot of new things. So it's only going to be after kind of we have a very large established base that you might start to see people say, well, let's start thinking about what could we standardize.
Yeah, cool.
Perfect. The fourth one is basically divided into two sections. AWS documentation is, however, in depth but difficult to decode, especially when it comes to working directly with the underlying APIs by passing AWS SDK or console for multiple proprietary and certain requirements. Any extension to the existing community engagements plan, encouraging documentation like Wikipedia or something to get more, for a wider people, I would say.
Sure. So this is a little surprising to read. We do put a lot of investment into making our documentation as good as it could be, but I would tell everybody that if at any point along the way, if you're reading a piece of AWS documentation and you're having trouble figuring it out, that's because we did something wrong. That's not because you did something wrong. And if you find something that is unclear or confusing or is just not helpful, there's always a feedback link at the bottom of every documentation page. Take advantage of that link. Send us a piece of feedback and say, this is what I was trying to do, and it simply wasn't helpful. The way our internal documentation works and the way our ticketing system works, if you put that piece of feedback in there, it creates a ticket. That ticket ends up right in the inbox of whoever wrote that documentation, and they have an actual job incentive to get those tickets addressed on a very timely basis. So we're always trying, but always tell us if we're not doing a good enough job.
Oh, that's interesting. That I was not aware of. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay. The second part is there a plan for a troubleshoot portal to allow parts step by step as like Jason and Lynn to diagnose issues that need?
So I would like to, yeah. So I would like to add here. So this couple of questions were from hardcore techies. So we tried to get it from multiple places like pre-sales, people in sales and solution architect, or people in business, people in directly CEOs from startups and all those companies, from corporates. And this is the question from hardcore techies, because when they are bypassing actually the there are many things they have to do. They simply don't want to do through AWS SDK or console, where they are directly calling S3 REST API, or they're using the DNS troubleshoot, right? So the signature specifically, or there are multiple things there which are in such a long layer said when they start passing the documentation, it takes them time. So they were just looking for something which can be easily like JSON linked, which we use for passing JSON document. Is there something similar to that which is in proposal to maybe do the DNS troubleshoot or something like that?
It's a kind of an interesting question, and it seems that a lot of our investment is probably going a little bit higher, probably going more at the SDK level. With that said, there's always room for better dev tools. This does seem to be an opportunity that maybe like for some open source tools to be built. If some of the I know that building signatures for API requests is very, very difficult, but because it's a very secure process. But there should be plenty of code out there that would show how to actually construct those signatures. Now, one thing that we just launched, let's see, a week or two ago that was pretty interesting was for step functions. If you're building step functions to take several pieces, several Lambda functions, and build business logic that invokes several step functions in a row, or maybe some in parallel, and works through that, we introduced a kind of a I forget the right word for it, like kind of a visualizer for your step functions that lets you see the inputs, the outputs, the parameters, the responses at each level of your step function. So that might be a kind of a good model for how a dev or debugging tool would work.
That's cool. There was another question, which is CI/CD for Android and iOS with AWS services. So this was again from someone who is more into a mobile architecture, and he has his own pain to talk about.
Yeah, I'd have to say I'm not super familiar with mobile development. I've never actually built a mobile app. I have run an SSH session into my Android phone, but that's about as far as I've gotten to actually doing mobile development. I'm definitely not the expert on this particular one.
Okay, so this was more around CI/CD enablement in the AWS services. So anyway,
Yeah.
we'll park it for. So we have a couple of questions coming on from the users. So I will just try to add on few. I will put that on the screen so that people who are on the stream can see. So one question is from Herbox, which is how is AWS code pipeline evolving to support workflows, remote agent, and better integration with Terraform like Azure DevOps pipeline has?
Let's see. Wow, that's a really good question. I'm trying to read this. Yeah, I'm actually not familiar enough with all of these details to really actually say. That's an amazingly good question. And one common misunderstanding about my job is that I actually know everything about everything, and for sure
Yes.
I actually don't.
Yeah. Okay.
And I would never even pretend to know everything. There are so many very, very interesting and very rich parts of AWS that I can barely know something about everything, much less everything.
We just know that you are the right person to pass this to the product team, what people are needing, right? So that's why we're trying to boggle with these questions. Yeah.
It's always great to just connect